Thanks, Debbie. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's get to productizing data. This session is for the data professionals. I want to just go through the recap, and I know Mark has actually just registered. There's a webinar that Doug Laney is doing on extracting value from your data. Is that correct? So if you guys are interested, I highly recommend it. I think personally, speaking for myself, I haven't paid enough attention, and I'm busy trying to recover as quickly as possible by spending time going through it. And one of the nice things about it is the work that I'm doing in Saudi Arabia. They've actually got a domain, and we need to start publishing plans and things like that. So I think it's come at a great time. So I'm going to briefly go through the essential concepts. Okay, some of the trends that will dominate, and this is the one I'm interested in, is accurately valuing data products. I don't think many of us can accurately evaluate that at the moment. Three of the important points on that presentation was Doug Laney saying the recognition that a chief data officer gets in terms of when they start to productize or commercialize their data. Now, I do believe, and I think Doug was very clear on this, is it's not just that I'm going to charge my customers money for it. There's cost reduction. There's multiple ways in which you can productize this data, multiple ways of expressing it. We spoke about having your existing products and then baking data into your existing products if it's not a data product. I shared some of our stories. For example, we have training courses, and then if we bake and we collect the data around the training, it's like how many webinars have you attended? How many assessments have you done? What were your scores? What case studies were you able to do? All these type of things where we get the data. We've got so much data there, and it's about then productizing that data. And then leveraging the value of the data to connect with the customer. So if we're collecting this data about it, can we use it to help them get work done and achieve certain jobs? And that's how we connect with the customers. That's how we get better value. I think I was really impressed with Spotify over December when they had a whole infographic about the mean that you were in terms of what you listened to and all sorts of other things that they brought about. Okay, so there was just some. Now, so this is what the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, KSA, has as their domain. I found their domain a little bit short in terms of not enough policy, in terms of defining valuation taxonomy. How would you rate the value of these products? So there's some areas missing in terms of policies and procedures and technology that we would use. For example, data as a service or whatever. So, but it's still there, and I like the fact that they're forcing people to start thinking about it. And in talking to the people that did it, one of the things that they highlighted was they've made a decision as a country to be open by default. Most of our ministries, our governments are trying to get to open by default. And then what the ministries kept saying to them as well, if you force me to open the data, then how do I generate extra revenue? And that's where some of the discussion started to come in, and so they're now using it. And I think we're all waiting for Doug Laney's book on the 200 or so case studies where he's actually achieved this. I think that would be helpful for us to study and understand what it's all about. So this is the playbook. Please, guys, if you have a question, I'm happy to stop and discuss it with you and maybe go a bit slower. But these are my four. When I use a playbook, there's sort of a total game plan that you have, trying to base it on some of the American football terminology. And we have these individual areas. So I see it, first of all, we position the value. We then discover the value that we have in our data. We agree on how to determine value, and then we want to recognize the value. So those are the four main areas that we need to focus on. And so we have these different steps that you need to go through to set all this up. Then we go in terms of building a value chain, and I'm going to really specialize on that today, focus on creating this value chain. You'll notice that this is really technical, almost from this part back. It should be done and probably performed by data professionals, data scientists, data engineers, all the different ones. So this is where we're focusing on today. This is the data product structure. So what does the data product look like? What are the possible options? And I know with JG's presentation, JG, all of a sudden when we went through this, could see a lot more opportunities where he could productize, whether it's creating revenue, whether it's exchanging revenue or value. There were all sorts of different opportunities. So this is what this, excluding all of the governance with sharing agreements, metadata, all our catalogs and data dictionaries, making the data understandable, and then the governance framework and ownership. So let's ignore that for now, but the core data as a service is we're getting data from external providers. Customers can submit their data and we can then compare their data to benchmark industry data. People will consume the data, and then we've got the different data layers. Detailed data is that fundamental or underlying data. Aggregate data is where we can generalize, roll it up, allow us to compare the customers to other customers without sharing details. Visualizations, actually, how do we create a visualization to present? And then patterns, where we look at insights and findings. Okay. And this is my valuation playbook, and I think I spent quite a bit of time last week on describing the definition of a value taxonomy, the different metrics that we're going to use, the different structure. Once we're in agreement with how to categorize value, then we can go on to understanding how we rate the value and how do we do the actual calculation. And I would like to suggest that we understand what jobs our consumers need to do, can we resolve them, and what questions can we answer. And once we've got that, we would then implement the metrics, apply the value, constantly applying the value on our data. And the interesting thing is when you do that, you start looking at the financial side of it, all of a sudden, data source selection criteria and different elements start to impact your data pipeline. So I found that quite interesting. I never expected that effect of when I've got this valuation and I understand my taxonomy, all of a sudden I'm being a little bit more particular about the data that's coming in. Okay, then I've got data as a service, and we went through the building of the platform. Okay, just to give a shout out to Infotech, they're the ones that I saw an initial presentation from them, and I thought they did a great job. So I've used quite a bit of their work and added some elements here. So I've added, they didn't have privacy and ethics impact, and they didn't have a feasibility study, which I think are critical, especially when you know that you may be facing some ethical challenges. What is the feasibility? Is it hard to deliver? And maybe you should just bench it for a while until it becomes more appropriate. Okay. Now, as part of the deck that I've got, and this is what I did the first week, there's all sorts of, this is the data value chain, the different 9 steps, the terminology, using a customer journey map to help you describe it, linking this to Bloom's taxonomy, and then using North Star to be able to measure which data products are important to you, data value realization traps, and we'll share a little bit about that. That's Bill, who's done a great work there. And then also, how do you measure business process optimization? So it's nice to have these values, but in some cases, you're going to develop a data product that really just does, it optimizes the process. And then how do we assign a value to that? And there was 21 metrics that I presented last week in terms of vetting or describing the benefit you get out of doing better process optimization. Okay, so the first week we did it on managing, how do you set up this whole environment. Then on citizens, we described just the value, that how do you describe the value, the taxonomy, and then we're now onto the building the product platform. Okay, this is where the professional is getting involved. Okay, so we go from there to, this is my data value chain. Just to highlight where I believe the data professionals getting in, they're getting involved in these different areas over here. Oh, shucks, I'm not sure why my animation is not working. It should just be the blue ones. Supporting data products, data value chain, external data providers, data as a service, and then the user experience. So these are the areas that the data professional is getting involved with. This is my value chain that I showed you. I'm going to take you through that in detail, the data service. And then I wanted to just come back to the diagram that Bill has put together. This is Bill, I still can't pronounce his name. I need to sort myself out and learn how to pronounce it the next time. So this is where we are. This is where our data professionals sitting. They're sitting in the data engineering, the machine learning ops, the machine learning engineering, and the data science feature engineering. So this is where your data scientist is operating. Then we've got data engineer and data engineer, and we've got some handovers from our data citizen to our data engineer. Okay, so if I look at the responsibilities, so what is this professional going to be responsible for? In terms of machine learning ops or DevOps or that, it's integrating data products into operational systems. So remember when I said we have our base product, and then we've got to connect our data to the base product. We've got to bake it into the base product, and that's what we're doing here. We have our operational systems, for example, an assessment or a learning management system. How do we bake data into this operational system? We've also got containerized the data product. That was data as a platform. When we talk about engineering, we creating the package. We're looking at instrumenting false positives and negatives. This is what they need to do. Constantly looking at the value of that. Managing the effectiveness of the data model. So if it's not effective and it's presenting wrong recommendations, maybe we should bin it for a while or come back to it. Look at how do we automate the pipeline, and then where we talk about building the data pipeline. Feature engineering. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of what feature engineering is. It's basically when we look at for causation, what features of our data model help us with the algorithm. So it's choosing the right features for the model. It's choosing the right methods, it's choosing the right tools, it's reducing the features. So if you've got a lot of noise, and this is sometimes where we have some challenges, we sort of exclude some of the features only to find out that they are important, but that's part of this process of false positives, negatives. And then we do feature development. So a lot of the times where your data scientist is sitting in there. Metadata enrichment algorithms, how do we keep on adding metadata to our systems? The work that Mark Nolte is doing a great job on, munging and wrangling the DAMA data. Select and provision data engineering tools, and then we recommend relevant data. So when we have an insight that we're looking for, or a use case, what is the appropriate data that we should present? And then once you've got that, we profile and understand the data that we're using. Now, what I liked about what he presented was showing me the potholes, and I'm not sure if this translates to Canada or the UK in terms of those holes that develop in the tar or the asphalt. These are some of the holes that we find. This is where we go wrong. So if our machine learning is not deploying those algorithms, we don't realize the value, that recognition at the end. We have often data products that are siloed and sitting on their own. Confirmation bias, if we're not constantly looking at our models. We have liabilities on some of the suggestions or recommendations we're making. and then our pipeline is drifting. And then there's this one statement, the one-off ETL and ELT scripts. And this is something that we teach in terms of how to analyze with big data. Some of the challenges we're facing now with our data scientists is that they basically remember what happens with the data lake, that transform is happening after the data is ingested, and it's typically happening each time they want to build an algorithm. They have these scripts and they get the data into the right format, but it's not shared and it's not commonly defined and done as an engineering process. So we can fall into these holes pretty quickly. And then what starts to happen as well is that we get these disconnected solutions. We have features that aren't involved and disconnected. Then we have problems in our data engineering potholes, one-off data enrichment. So we did a change to one data set or one transformation that's not applied to the others, or we've got 20 different versions of it, and we're just making a mess. We manually having to work out what's the appropriate data, and we manually cataloging our data. So these are all things that we have to be careful of. If we're going to take on a data lake where we're getting data as quickly as possible, we can't afford to keep on manually doing our data governance and metadata. Got to find better ways around it. Okay, so as I said, we're going to focus on building the data value chain as professionals. And last week, what I mentioned was that I've turned this, there is a paper on this, I've turned it around. Infotech also use it, where they say start with your data source and then look at the pipeline, look at the data, look at the analysis, and then look at how it's going to benefit your customer. I'm saying it's a bit wrong way around. And I'd love for any comments from you guys. But typically what I say is understand the value you're producing to your customer. Who is it that we need to be focusing on? What is the persona or that customer journey map? How would you deliver the customer how would you deliver the data product to the customer? What information do we need to present? So that's the jobs to be done. Then what type of data analysis do we do? Then what is the data set that we need? How do we collect the data? How do we build the pipeline? And then what's our appropriate data sources? Now, they are suggesting you take all your data sources in a data catalog and you say, well, what value can this data source do? And I'm saying, sure, it's great, but I'm a data engineer and I don't really know what the value is. So surely I should have an understanding of what the value is, and then I can find a data source. So yeah, Mark said, to me, it's beginning with the end in mind. What is it? What is the value I want to give to my customer so I can make sure I'm doing the right analytics? But if I go the other way, I can do any form of analytics, and then what am I presenting? Yeah, I like that, Connie. That's starting with the decisions in mind, and I really like that. What questions and what decisions do you need to have? Okay. All right, so that's the process. So can you see, I start with my customer, I then look at how I'm going to deliver the customer. So this is how the customer is going to interact with us and the value. I look at how we're going to deliver information. I then go on to what information do I need on the data source, what sort of analytics to answer the questions and help them make decisions. What data analysis methods, predictive, prescriptive, all those type of things. Then what data is needed for the analysis. Then how am I going to collect the data? Then where can you get the data from to support the analysis? Okay, so this is the way I'm suggesting. This is the way I'm putting all the plans together. But I suppose you may come the other way around when you find you've got a new data element. You could say to the citizen, what value do you think we could get? But I think that would always be we've got certain use cases of value that we would put into a back order, and when we find the data, we may bring it in, or when we make it feasible. So here's an example of what we do, what we're designing. We're actually looking at a data value for health services, health practitioners that need to be certified. So they need certain training. And so one would start off, very simple one is what knowledge do you need? So if there's a new approach to certain medicines, I need to give you some training. We need to help you with the training, and the training may lead to certification, but the very first thing is providing you with better knowledge management. So that there is my value proposition to the learner, the health professional, the data management professional. This is the value proposition. I can manage your knowledge a lot better. And how would we interact with it? Well, we'll interact with it on a web platform, a learning platform, on a phone. We would deliver the information through that. And if we go back, what I'm going to be producing is how many knowledge hours have you logged, how many webinars have you attended, and then connected to those webinars, how many assessments have you written in that topic? So, for example, doing an assessment on data product valuation. Should we have some questions and should we do an assessment? And then you can almost, to an extent, if you pass that, you can recognize value in that area. Okay, what sort of analysis we want to do? We want to be able to say, well, what are you spending your time learning about? Are you learning about all sorts of stuff that doesn't make you bring any value? And that's a bit of a touchy subject, because we know that lots of things are connected. So how do we know what's valuable? And then we come back down to the data. So what I'm looking for is a data set with all the knowledge hours and a data set that contains my recognition. So how do I recognize that? So either I recognize it by doing an assessment, or I recognize it by achieving a certification, or I recognize it by a platform where my peers acknowledge that I have the appropriate knowledge. So how do I collect the data? I can collect it with Teams attendance, using a record of the attendance using Teams, and I'll pick it up from webinars, courses, and conferences. This is where I'm going to pick my data up. Okay. So that's sort of the easy one. Okay, Rob, I see a question. I'm just going to pause for a while. Do you find it difficult in getting the customer to define what they require from the data? And the answer is yes. And Doug Laney does workshops where he actually starts to envision his business people to think about data products, to think about the possibilities of creating value from the data. Rob, am I to understand that you've actually put a link to a meetup, or is this a separate meetup? Okay. All right. So this is an easy one, guys. I'm just hoping simple. This is data value chain number one. Okay. And I'm sure you all understand it. There are some examples of Fitbit and health and fitness management and heartbeats and steps and stuff like that. So it's helpful just to get your thinking right, and work through the easy ones, because they get quite complicated. So just to take you through this, now when I talk about learning management, and just to give you some background, when we define learning, we talk about knowledge, skills, competencies, and attitudes or abilities. And so you need to bring all of this data together. So yes, you may be fantastic at doing data strategies, but your attitude is it's bad. You don't encourage the business to contribute to the engagement. So you don't, because you don't have the right awareness, they don't think properly about the data strategy, so you get rubbish coming back from them. I find that quite often. Now that's the type of attitude or behavior that you as a professional need to work on to get better results from your business engagement. Okay. All right, so we're talking about better learning management. So the first step we talk about is, well, how would we present this to the user in terms of doing a jobs to be done, and answering their questions. Okay, so you may remember from the very first session, I had a customer journey map, and I explained how the customers would move along the journey to get more learning. And what we would be doing is using a learning management system. So we would be exposing this information to the customer via a website. Okay, so basically we're defining how the information will be presented to the customer. This is the step that we're talking about. How are you going to interact with the user? Are you going to, whilst they're training, can you have a just-in-time micro-learning recommendation to tell them, oh, they need to learn this new task of building a data product or building a data strategy, and not having to go on a 5-day course. They can do it in 15-minute sessions. So that's what you need to start thinking about at that level. And then we would say, well, okay, once we understand this experience, how would we drive our recommendations for learning to our customers? So one of the things that we're talking about here, one way would be an email. So we're saying, all right, you've just completed your learning about this, and now we recommend this next step of learning. Or we just recognize that you've got a new project that you dependent on, so let's recommend this new learning for you. So we'd be constantly doing it either by email or pop-ups whilst they're on the platform to say, new bit of learning, this can help you with your next task that you need to perform on a project. So we'll send you an email, and this is the jobs to be done that you said to us, this is what I want to do. Okay, now, Connie, this is something that I like to do, is I like to structure my programs, my questions for data analysis. So when it comes to better learning, I'm interested in measuring and monitoring the progress of my people's learning. And there was a really nice presentation by Seth Goodwin on learning and the different forms of learning, from e-learning to face-to-face learning to college learning. And what he was saying, one of the challenges that he has when he builds courses, he doesn't have a lot of people finishing the courses. So he says in the region of 10% finish a course that could have cost $5,000 to $6,000. People don't finish the course. Now, Seth Godin, yes, you're right, Mark, not Goodwin. Seth Godin. So what we're wanting to do here is, as we're measuring the progress of learning, we want at a regular basis to say, what has your learning progress been in the last week? Whatever period you analyze. Why was that learning progress made or not made? So did I reach my target? Did I get there on target? When will you achieve the learning goals and the target that you've set yourself to on the current progress that you're making? What can we do to optimize the learning progress? So if you're getting stuck, what is it that we can do? How can we help you get over this thing? And then what don't we know about your learning progress, and try to get some feedback. So I like having those standard 5 questions in terms of structuring the type of information I present to look at from an algorithm point of view. And these are the questions, what decisions need to be made, and then what are my actions? So this is what the data analysis is looking at. Then we go back a step back. Okay, so what data analysis do I need to do? So I'm focusing on recognized learning units. And now I've looked at what are the important measurements. So what is my rate of course completion? What is my rate of work completion? What is my satisfaction as an employee? And then if we look at long-term results, if I look at the retros on Agile, after action reports, what is the feedback that are coming? Are people noticing that I'm starting to comprehend, I'm starting to have better competencies, I can deliver quicker, performance reviews, and certification success ratio. Then when we go to the next step, we're saying, okay, what is the data? And I've defined this data set as a learning journey. And we then look at the collection process. We're collecting all this data, and then here are my data sets that I need to bring in, okay? Who are in the involved parties, the learners, the L&D department for the organization that's measuring someone's performance. I've got training master data of the products. I've got my DMBOK knowledge domain. So if you're a data professional and you don't know how to do data quality or do a profile assessment, I can tell you exactly what activities to perform and what deliverables you need to produce. Then we want a taxonomy of a competency model, and I'll show you some examples of this. We want a competency model master data definition. So we have all of the information about my job profiles and job competencies that I'm going to measure myself on. And then, of course, what learning goals do you have and recommendations have we made? So if I've made you 20 recommendations and you've accepted none of them, then you're starting to give me feedback in terms of you don't really think much of my recommendations. So the fact tables will be my knowledge, skill, competency, and ability data. My learning progress would be part of learning actions. What recommendations have I sent you? What have you accepted? What have you rejected? And then what are the outcomes according to these long-term and satisfaction results? What outcomes are we getting and deriving? So I'm hoping you're seeing that this becomes a little bit more complicated. It started off very easy, one data set. Now we're getting to a whole lot of stuff with a whole lot of calculations and models that need to be presented. Any questions so far? Is it pretty easy?
Pretty easy once you've done it 25 times.
So yeah, I mean, how that was a question is like, this looks like it's iterative learning that's gone on here. You've evolved, and you're sharing with us.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's what's happened here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, you mustn't underestimate the number of weeks I've taken to think about this and put it together.
Exactly. You didn't come up with this in the shower this morning.
No. And so typically what you'll find is I was referring to this one, is that this one, just by looking at the examples, you should be able to put something like this together. But we know that your higher value products are more about, not just collecting the original source data or data around your learning, but what do I do with that data? How do I make you be more effective at your job with that data? Rob, you got a question?
I do. It's like a lot of things. It says, whether it's how you use the data and when you get the value, how you use the education and when you get the value. And the value is only when it is applied or utilized or exploited or whatever words you want to use.
Yeah.
So are you, and it sounds like a bit of a, what's the right word? Mystical question to go and say, can one go as far as to see what value the learning, or in the case of the data, is actually, what value is being derived from what this is all about?
Yeah, I like what you're asking there, Robin. And a lot of the times it comes back to, first of all, understanding when you're looking at how do you measure your progress of learning, you would have those leading indicators. For example, course completion rate. How many courses have I completed? Okay, I've done 72 courses. Fantastic. But then how does that relate to your work completion rate? So am I delivering on my job? And that's where that recognized learning unit comes in. So it's not just the fact that I've done all this learning, but is it having an impact on my work?
Yeah.
And that's where some of the data collection challenges come in. So I may need to get an after action report from the organization, if they're interested, to be able to say, shucks, you had to do a data quality thing, and one of the compliments was that you did it really well, or one of the things was saying we should stop doing this around your data quality performance. Now, that's the one thing. And then what we can see in terms of your performance reviews and certification. What I liked about one of the examples that Fitbit presented, Rob, was, you know, they collect the steps and they collect the sleep hours. Then they've just sold their business to Google, right? What they were able to do is demonstrate to Google what the value of that exercise meant to the health industry. And we know, for example, we've got a great example with Discovery. How important is that exercise information to Discovery? Okay, so they are dependent on Garmin, Strava, Fitbit, whatever it is, and that's where they collect the data. So what Fitbit is saying is, what value are your insurers willing to pay for these 10,000 steps per user? Rob, does that answer your question?
It's a good practical example. Yes, just take, well, can you take us through where your training actually stops, or where the learning actually stops? Do you have take customers through real life examples that they can come up with, where they have followed the process and they bring back to the learning how to actually get the best out of this?
That's a great question. So we, as you said, what word do you use? We use the word recognized. Okay, so for example, Veronica does the data management for certification training, and that's fantastic. It's really hard. It's 4 days of intense going through the entire DMBOK. Now, that training is useless until we get a certification, until you've achieved a certification on certifying that learning unit has been recognized. So the value of the number of hours spent learning compared to the recognized learning units, very different. Okay, similar to what we do with our how-to courses, is what we try to do is make it more practical, because the first one is 4 days of knowledge. The other how-to courses, for example, we would do a how to analyze data, and in our how to analyze data, we have a data value chain, and especially for data architects on how to plan data, and we'd show and then say, okay, now you build as a case study, you build a data value chain. Build it for me and let's have a look at it, and you do a case study, and then we review the case study.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So and then moving on. So that's the process. So what I wanted to show you was, okay, and there is the Excel spreadsheet, guys. So if you want it, happy that you can come and get it. Now, I wanted to take you through a quick run on this competency model. I'm sure you saw me present it, and you may not know how complex that learning model is, or that competency model is. So just want to take you through that quickly. And then I'll show you how we've done it. So this is the competency model. There's lots and lots and lots of work that's been done on it. I'm blown away. It's a nice taxonomy ontology for measuring competencies. So you can see here we have a competency, we have knowledge, and we will then derive a skill that says that we have that knowledge. Okay. So yes, I have a knowledge on how to do a data profile. Veronica taught me, how do I do a data profile? Now Howard Diesel comes along and we do a data quality thing on profiling data. Now I have this skill. Okay, I've actually got the skill, and I've got performance indicators that will measure the skill. Okay, and we can also allocate a value to that skill. Now, this knowledge, and this is a generic ontology, it could be applied to the data management body of knowledge, which is the domain ontology. So if we could build a DMBOK domain ontology, we can then say, okay, we do an assessment for all our data professionals. What knowledge do you have in the different areas? Okay, great. Now we want to do a skill. Now show me evidence that you've been able to do a data profile, and then how have people rated you on that? And this all then comes down here. We can see activities, documents, and actors. Now, these things are defined in the DMBOK by knowledge area, by activity, by deliverable. We have these different areas over here. Now, what they've also added is what they call a competency referential. So you can relate this competency to other competencies. So they build and they scale. And there's a really nice one for anyone who's interested in digital transformation. There's a website called SFIA, and they've got all of the competency models for digital transformation. And so you have this map sitting there. And I'm sure you're asking, well, that's nice, but what would I use this for? Okay, so let me go through some of those questions. These are the different ontologies and elements like that. These areas over here represent your attitude. So how effective are you and how social are you at interacting and performing that skill? We all know the change management issues, the engagement with our customers. We know those different challenges that we face. This is the data around measuring a competency. What's the frequency of my delivery? What's the scope? How autonomy, can I do it all on my own? What's the complexity? And I've got this proficiency scale. And then we keep on going, and notice now that we get an e-portfolio. So all of a sudden, as I'm collecting this evidence, I can be building a portfolio. Now that's what our actors do, our people that operate in cinematography and art type of things. They have to present their portfolio to people so people can say, all right, I can see that you've got the skills. As data management people, we hardly ever present a portfolio. I haven't known anybody to say, give me your portfolio. I have sometimes when I do an RFP for work, they say, show me the templates and show me what you're doing. But I haven't seen people spending a lot of time in that area. Okay, so there's a personalization that goes in, but what I wanted to show you was here, for example, is a scenario. Okay, so we have a student that comes in. They are asked to compare two different planets at the properties. It will be reviewed by a professor. And to do this, that task has a set of target competencies and properties. Okay, and they would say, well, oh, Mr. Student, do you have those target competencies? Can you perform this task? Okay, if I can't relate it to that domain, then you need some knowledge, you need some education, you need some skills development. Okay, once I can now go and compare these two different planets, and then I would go to the next step of working through that. So what this learning recommendation is doing is it's using machine learning to be able to drive the next piece of learning. What is the task that you need to do? If you don't have the competencies, this is what I would recommend. Do it 10, 15 minutes and on you go, and you progress. And then what you can do is if you're building a team, especially if you're in a big organization and you need to put a team together, you can start doing a comparison with different people having to produce different work. You can have this comparison criteria of two different competencies that you're looking to develop. Okay. This was the skills framework, SFIA. It's available to you. These are the things that you work on. These are the different levels that you can operate in your skill: follow, assist, apply, enable, advise, influence, strategy. Those are the 7 levels of the skills development. Then they talk about T skills in terms of what skills do you need to go deep, what skills do you need to go broad. And of course, I'm sure you may remember when I presented the T skills of a CDO. Things like change management would be on the wider area, and they would have less depth, but they need to understand it and be aware of it. And the nice thing about it, this SFIA has a data science body of knowledge. They've actually got they call it the DSBOK. Okay, so I thought you guys may be interested in it. And then they've got taxonomies and different skills that you need to do to be able to perform something, your professional certification. So they've got this competency model developed. As part of the BOK, they've developed it. Interesting to know, we as DAMA, Mark, that would be a good question for you, maybe, is in terms of saying, would this competency model be helpful to us in our area? I have noticed that a lot of the times when you go to SFIA, they really don't have anything called data management. They've got things like wrangling the data or transforming the data, but they don't have all of the different knowledge areas. So it's very disjointed, and they reference the DMBOK, but they don't have any of the knowledge areas and competencies in these different areas. So
That's what we're here for, Howard. Come on.
yeah, yeah.
If they start doing everything, they don't need us.
Okay. So this is a nice framework for data science. I wanted to share. Now, what I wanted to do is just give you a final example before we go. So this was an example of what we had, but let's say you guys you were tasked to build a data product, JG. You have been asked to build a data product for your customer, or you put your hand up to build a data product for your customer. So what would this look like? Well, we now are saying I've got the properties of a data product. I can build a target of that. I have the target competencies of building a data product. I can compare these two different offerings to see, well, I can have a guidance or a mentor validating that people can do it. So now we've got JG as the student, and he's going to be guided by Howard Diesel as the professor. Sorry, I didn't want to go that far, but just as an example. And here we have the competencies. So to do a data product, you've got to position the value, you've got to discover the value, you've got to agree on the value, and then you've got to get recognition for the value. Those are the four properties of a data product, the four competencies, sorry. What are the properties? These become our deliverables. You've got to understand the business need, the business delivery, the value chain, the base products, the data value proposition, the structure, the product hierarchy, all of the different deliverables that you need to be able to do as part, need to be able to create as part of a data product definition. So we would then have an ability to merge to say, oh, JG doesn't know how to produce a product hierarchy. Okay, what training and what skill do I need to, okay, so for you to do that, we need to do all of those areas on value recognition because it came in that area. And so we can go about helping you learn and not have to go through a 5-day course on data analysis to understand how to build a data product. Okay, so that's my story. That's sort of how one can bring these data products together, how you could apply it in a learning environment, how you can connect the data and start making recommendations to improve the business, to get the jobs done for consumers, to be more efficient, cost time savings. These are the things that you can give back to the business by focusing on your data product. Are there any questions? I think Patrick had one there. So Patrick, I'll go back to it. You did say that I didn't need to. Is this model actually from SFIA? No, this one isn't, John. This competency model is from a few things that were done for the EU. I picked up the data models over there, but I do know that the UK, as Connie is saying, uses SFIA. Yes, that would be great. Okay, then what was Patrick's question? Patrick, on manually tagging and cataloging, what platform was used here? Feel free. So Patrick, what Bill was saying is that if you're using a data lake and you manually tagging and cataloging the data in your data lake, you're going to fall into the hole. That's what he calls the pothole. Okay. So what you are finding, and lots of people are trying to present that this is the answer to the Holy Grail, the data mesh, the data fabrics, they're going to do all this stuff. You must read or listen to Scott Taylor, where he talks about all this terminology and how they're going to dynamically build the ontologies and things like that. Or everything's meta-driven. Lots of questions are still out there, but what they are saying is if you going to get involved with manually adding all these data sets in your data lake to a catalog before it's searchable, you've got some challenges and you have to do something to overcome that. Okay, Patrick. All right. Any questions? JG, any questions from yourself, sir? Or Mark?
I'm happy to try and apply this framework. I mean, I'm not building a data product right now, but I will be again.
Yes. And I think maybe, I know you do a lot of warehousing and stuff like that, Mark. As architects, we need to understand what are our products, and then we focus on building the flows that will build our products, and we then can measure the value that we're delivering using those products. But it's actually really nice, and I wanted to share somewhere just in terms of I think it was, yeah, so let's just go down to, this was something that I think someone asked with those data value. This was
Like
the game board, and this is what I like in terms of this value creation platform. So what we're saying, notice all of the benefits that we're talking about at the high level on the business, and then we're drilling into the lake to find the data. So how do we remodel the stores? How do we look at manager retention or hiring effectiveness or campaign effectiveness? And then we drill into the data lake to find the data that's going to help us do that. But a lot of the times we're going to need some strong metadata to describe all of our data sources and our data catalogs within that. There's quite a lot of work to get through that.
Howard, can you go back to the slide with the pit, with it like looked like snakes and ladders? I think
Yes.
I must have been refilling my coffee when that one came up. And that's a good thing about this hanging out from home. That's also the bad thing, because you can miss stuff.
Yeah, sure. So this is the game board that he put together. I found it very focused on machine learning, and I feel that it's not just machine learning. All analytics can use this. But what I really liked was, for example, falling into the data swamp problem, chasing technology problem, overinflating your data value problems, and then career limiting moves in this scenario. Rob, I see you have a question. Am I missing something? Quite possible. I struggle with data value until it's information. It's information. I do agree with you, Rob. I don't think you want to value your default or your fundamental data. I think there is value for people to get value out of a data dump. Just yesterday we were talking about waste management, and there they would go to, if I've got all the data about when the different trucks were delivering value, what type, or delivering waste, what type of waste were they doing. There's lots of analysis you can do around that, and in some cases there's lots of value. For example, Bloomberg's, where they publish just the prices on the stock market, last price. That's data. There's very little information there, but people will pay big money to have that foundational data. Rob, does that answer your question? So you've almost done nothing on that data from Reuters, and they're making good money out of it. They've been making good money out of it for many years. Yeah, it's a good comment there, John, in terms of a different metaphor than the lake, meshes and fabrics. It's a grocery store where data products have that UPC, correct. So it would be nice to be able to go into there. Kimball uses the dining metaphor, the menu, where you go in and you see the menu and you can choose from the menu. But I like your approach. The grocery store is also a good one. The data buffet, yeah.
I was pitching the data buffet to my mining client, the idea of all the different sources. we're back in the kitchen. So the analogy was, rather than you go to the restaurant and the menu, the waiter comes over with the menu and you look at the menu and you pick, then he goes back and tells the chef, okay, I need steak medium rare on table 3. And 20 minutes later, your prepared meal shows up. It's more like a buffet. You go and there's already quality controlled, warm, ready to eat food all laid out. And you pick your carb, you pick your protein, you pick your veg, and go back to your table and eat. It's faster. Now, there's the upfront cost of building the kitchen, building out the steam tables, aka the warehouse.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Suncor management thought they knew better. So
Agreed. So I'm just trying to get to. I'm trying to get to a screen. Connie made a view of that data product. And I'm not sure why. Slide 50.
here to have a slide data management problem.
Yeah, I've got a few of those. So what we actually had the data product presentation some time back, Connie. I'll find it for you and present it. But what I am finding, what I do like, is this platform view that I shared earlier on. So let's look at 71. Okay, so I like this definition of there's your raw data, you then aggregate the data, you then look at visualizations, and then you look at insights, which was not exactly the same as what Paul presented, but it's close in terms of that being your raw data. And when you pay more attention to that data product and what your consumers are interested in, would they be interested in the raw data? What is the value of the raw data? And I'm assuming, JG, that's something that you were looking at, is to say, if they send me a balance sheet and I merely add certain tagging for a ESG framework to the balance sheet, you know, I haven't aggregated it, but I've then augmented their balance sheet with ESG data. Is that a service? Is that something that people are interested in paying for? Or,
Yeah.
sorry, JG.
No, precisely that. It's almost like I don't know whether I call it the right thing, but it's like auxiliary data or metadata tagging to that element, and that's actually an enrichment.
Yes.
And you know, also just realizing to timestamp things in itself is valuable.
Right.
So just to never lose sight of when this thing came in. Absolutely, that aggregation doesn't necessarily mean you aggregating and getting a summarized view. Sometimes you're aggregating with other items and you're getting an enhanced auxiliary view.
Right. Yeah, I think it's around about supper time for us. So all the talk of buffets and one of the things that I think I presented last week was how the quality of the data impacts the value of the data. Remember, I showed you these when I spoke on my value taxonomy, and we spoke on these ones over here, and we spoke about using quality with accuracy, accessibility. Maybe I'll just, sorry, Mark, I can see your eyes straining. How they bring quality into the data valuation taxonomy. So can you see that they actually do surveys of the customers to say, of the data that I presented to you, what was the accuracy level? And they focus on, each time I improve that, I'm going to get better trust from my customer, I'm going to get better recommendations, I'm going to get better understanding of what I'm presenting. So quality is certainly a thing. Linking it to data management maturity is another one. That's something that I'm working with in Saudi Arabia, is to say, you know, if this data that we've put onto a platform we can guarantee that it's at a level 3 in our data management maturity. What is the benefit of that over a level 2? You know, what extra stuff have I added? Have I added all the master data, the data definitions, and all of that type of stuff? So have I achieved the value of my my data management that I'm applying? Okay. Any last comments? Any feedback? Any areas that we can look at improving?
What's your unit of measure for the value here? Is this rand or dollars, or what do you?
Oh, I actually left it out because I wanted to make it universal.
Sure.
Globalize
local currency, so
yes.
the Saudis can pay more.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if I could do a total learning recommendation project that generated $2 million, I could then retire finally.
Yeah. Now, what Fitbit does, which was interesting, they had several elements to their calculation. One was, for example, they globalized or aggregated the number of steps. So they actually used a marker of 10,000. So they said, and if you notice, your daily goal rate should be 10,000. So they've somehow set that goal for health industries, and then they sell the unit per 100,000 steps. And the same with sleep hours, they've set it to 8 hours. You know, so it's only when you achieve an 8-hour sleep day do you see value in the data. So that's almost like my recognized learning unit concept. So there's quite a lot of thinking on yeah, I've done, for example, I've done 5 days or 4 days of 12-hour days. Let's make it easy. So I've got 48 hours, but what's the value? You're wrong.
Howard, thanks. You had a slide a while back that dealt with false positives and
yes, that feature, yes.
Yes, and it just kind of raised a thought that do you then build rules into the data which would actually govern what the constraints are or what the thresholds are for false positives and negatives, like for example?
Okay, so what you'll do with that, and let me just quickly get to that slide. Now, it's not so much a data issue, but it's a recommendation, right? So, for example, if I make a recommendation to you about you should learn this, and you don't agree, and it's a false recommendation, that's referred to as a false positive. If I tell you that you don't need to worry about this learning, saying you're wasting time learning this, and there is benefit, that's a false negative. Now that can also be with recommendations. Should I grant this person a loan? So false positive would be yes, and it's wrong. The person defaults. A false negative would mean no, and the person can afford it. That's what you refer to as a false positive and negative. Does that explain that, Rob?
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just thinking of the thresholds to what constitutes a false positive and negative. As a rule, you might recall the work that we did back in the ATM and putting fingerprints on ATMs and whether they were,
So you would have your error rate. There's actually something that you calculate as your error rate. So you'd plot all your recommendations, understand they're right or wrong, and then you would then build an error rate. So if your error rate is 1 out of every 1,000 recommendations is wrong, then I'm fine. But if it creeps along above a certain amount, then you've got to stop and relook at the model to say that you're predicting your model that's predicting your recommendation is wrong. So you've you're getting too many false positives and negatives. But you've got to monitor the false positives and negatives.
Okay, cool.
So any form of predictive recommendation service, go here, go there, and then if you don't get the feedback to say, well, you gave me that recommendation, but it was rubbish, you're not able to work out false positives and negatives unless the system's encapsulated within your own organization. Like we suggested that you don't give this person a loan, and you did, and look what happened, or different areas like that.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty. Great. JG, anything from your side before we go? Last question.
And no, Howard, I mean, I think I don't. The one thing I probably am missing is the link to the knowledge competency. Yeah, like how does that get itself into the spreadsheet? But I feel like that's a bit of a problem for the last question of the day.
So sorry, JJ. It's when we did the first data products thing on the managers, I used a case study of Modelware to show people how I'm thinking about baking my data into our training products and what data is important for me to collect about training. And so KSCA is all about managing your competency. So what is the value of the knowledge that you're receiving today, JG? How much did you benefit from it?
Yeah.
Yes, you've got 1 hour of knowledge going on 1.5 hours. But what does it mean to you? How do you get recognized as that?
And I get it. Yeah. So it's the bake-in process, and it's like, how do you close the loop?
Yes.
Yeah.
So for each customer, you're going to have to find a different way of baking the data into your original product.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Unless you've got an existing data product, and then you'd look at different ways.
Yeah, but the chances are high that you'll be pulling metadata tags off usage, availability,
right.
you know, time on screen, whatever, you know.
That's a good observation. Yeah. So yes, I've got the base data coming in, but now I've enriched your data and I've baked my data into your data.
Yeah. Thanks, Howard.
Excellent. All right, guys. Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
See you next week, folks. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Cheers, Rob. Have a good one.
You too.